The alarm on my phone went off at 5:02 a.m. It's a gentle, synthesized chime I programmed myself, but my body was awake at 4:58, bracing for it. I slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb Daniel. He needs his sleep. Today is Founders' Day, the holiday he invented for himself, marking the anniversary of the day he sketched the code for his company on a napkin. This year, by some cosmic joke, it landed on Mother's Day. I didn't mind. Or rather, I told myself I didn't. I padded barefoot across the heated bamboo floors. My choice, I specified them in the blueprints, and went downstairs. The house was silent. This is my favorite time, the hour before the sun crests over the Cascades, before the light floods the 2-story glass wall I designed, before I cease to be Maya, the architect, and become simply infrastructure. I started the coffee first. Daniel likes a single-origin pour-over. He says the Keurig is an insult to the bean. While the water heated to exactly 202 degrees, I pulled out the ingredients for the cheese blintzes. It's his favorite. A recipe that takes 3 hours, requires clarified butter, and uses a specific farmer's cheese I have to drive 30 minutes to get. I wanted today to be perfect. Daniel's startup just secured its second round of funding. He's the king, and our 16-year-old son, Alex, is the heir apparent. I am just the person who maintains the castle. The smell of vanilla and warm cheese filled the air. I arranged the blintzes on our wedding china, fanning strawberries beside them just so. I'd polished the silverware last night. I set the table, aligning the forks and knives with the obsessive precision I once used for architectural renderings. Everything in this house, from the load-bearing walls to the placement of the outlets, was a product of my mind, a career I'd put on ice 12 years ago to support his. I thought, this year, maybe they'd see. Maybe the convergence of the two holidays would spark something. An acknowledgement, a thank you. At 7:30, I heard footsteps. Daniel emerged, already dressed in a crisp, logoless black t-shirt that probably cost $400. Alex was right behind him, his phone already in his hand, held up at chest level. "Happy Founders' Day, darling," I said, smiling. "Happy Mother's Day." Daniel grinned, a wide, confident CEO on a keynote stage grin. "Big day, Maya, big day." Alex, his eyes already locked on his screen, just smirked. "This is going to be epic," he muttered. My stomach tightened. That's the word Alex uses. He's the captain of the debate team. Words are his weapons. Epic is never good for the person on the other end. "I have something for you," Daniel said, his voice booming with false magnanimity. A little token of appreciation for everything you do. He walked over to the kitchen island, where a large, flat object wrapped in plain brown paper was leaning. It wasn't a drugstore gift bag. It wasn't last minute. This was planned. My heart, that stupid, hopeful muscle, gave a little flutter. "Alex, you getting this?" Daniel asked. "Rolling, Dad," Alex said. His phone's red record light was a tiny, mocking eye. I wiped my hands on my apron, the apron I'd sewn myself. I walked over, my bare feet suddenly cold on the bamboo floor. "Go on," Daniel urged, gesturing expansively. I pulled at the paper. It was heavy. It wasn't a canvas print of a family photo. It was a frame. A heavy, expensive-looking black frame with a gold leaf inlay. I tore the last piece of paper away and my breath just stopped. It wasn't a picture. It was a document. Printed on thick, parchment-style paper in elaborate Gothic calligraphy was a title. Certificate of Uselessness. Below the title, smaller, it read, "Awarded to Maya Jensen for 12 consecutive years of negligible contribution." And at the bottom, 2 signatures. One Daniel's, in his arrogant, oversized scrawl. The other, Alex's, a perfect, practiced loop. I stood there holding this testament to my own obsolescence. The smell of the blintzes, the ones I woke up at 5 a.m. to make, turned sour in my throat. Then the laughter started. It wasn't a chuckle. It was a full-throated, tear-streaming, knee-slapping roar. Daniel doubled over, pointing. "Oh my God, her face. Alex, tell me you got her face!" Alex was practically hyperventilating, his phone shaking as he tried to zoom in on my stunned silence. It's so perfect," he gasped out. Their laughter echoed. It bounced off the quartz countertops I'd picked, ricocheted off the vaulted ceiling I'd designed, and hammered against my eardrums. It was the loudest sound in the world. I looked from the certificate to their 2 faces, contorted in shared, cruel delight. They were a team, a 2-man audience, and I was the joke. Daniel, wiping a tear from his eye, finally caught his breath. It's just a bit of disruptive humor, Maya. You get it. You've always been a good sport. I looked down at the certificate again. Negligible contribution. Something inside my chest, something that had been soft and hopeful and stupidly persistent for 12 years, didn't just break. It turned to ice. It shattered. And then it settled, hard and sharp and cold. I felt my lips pull back into a smile. It was a terrible, hollow expression. I heard myself make a small, breathy sound that was supposed to be a laugh. That's my girl, Daniel said, patting my shoulder. He turned toward the table. Now, are those blintzes? I'm starving. He and Alex sat down and started eating the breakfast I'd made, their laughter still bubbling up as they talked about the video, about how gold my reaction was. I just stood there holding the frame. The glass felt cold against my palms. I didn't move. I just watched them eat, and I planned. I set the frame down on the counter. I did it very gently, very precisely, placing it directly over a faint coffee ring that Daniel had left yesterday, the one I hadn't had time to scrub out. Certificate of uselessness. It covered the stain perfectly. You're not having any, Maya? Daniel asked, his mouth full of blints. You worked so hard on them. I'm not hungry, I said. My voice sounded strange, thin and metallic in my own ears. Suit yourself. He shrugged, already reaching for another. Alex didn't look up from his phone, probably editing the video, adding a filter, maybe some laugh track audio. I turned my back to them and walked to the sink. They never helped clean up. They called it Maya's Zen time, another one of their little jokes. Let her have her Zen time at the sink. It was just their way of reframing chores as a privilege. I turned on the water, scalding hot. The steam rose and hit my face, and for a second I was grateful for it. It was a physical sensation. It proved I was still here, in my body, and not floating somewhere near the vaulted ceiling I'd drafted. I picked up Daniel's plate. Empty, smeared with cream cheese and strawberry streaks. I started scrubbing. The sound of the ceramic scraping against the stainless steel sink basin was sharp. Behind me, the laughter spiked again. Dude, I'm posting this on the private family story, Alex said. Aunt Chloe's going to die. Just make sure you caption it right, Daniel replied, his voice full of paternal pride. Make sure they know she laughed. She's a good sport. She's a good sport. A good sport. A good sport. The words just echoed in my head. I'd been a good sport when Daniel forgot our anniversary 3 years in a row. Because he was deep in a coding sprint. I'd been a good sport when Alex accidentally donated my old architectural portfolios to a high school paper drive, saying he needed the trunk space for his debate trophies. I'd been a good sport when Daniel's investors complimented him on the house, and he'd just smiled and said, Thanks, I have a good eye for design. I stopped scrubbing. I was holding the plate submerged in the hot, soapy water, and that's when I heard it. It wasn't loud. It was a tiny sound, deep inside my head. It was a click. It was the sound of a lock, rusted shut for 12 years, finally tumbling open. It was the sound of the last frayed thread of hope snapping clean. It was the sound of a decision being made so deep inside me that my conscious brain was the last to know. I was done. It wasn't dramatic. The sky didn't open up. I didn't throw the plate. I didn't burst into tears. I just stopped. The numbness that had frozen me in place evaporated, and in its void, something else rushed in. It was a feeling so cold and so clear, it was almost peaceful. It was pure, unadulterated resolve. It was the same feeling I used to get when I finally solved a complex structural problem. When I saw the lines of the building, clear and perfect in my mind, I knew exactly what the next step was. I took my hands out of the water, dried them on a dish towel, and hung the towel on its hook. I walked out of the kitchen. Where are you going? Daniel called after me, his tone suddenly annoyed. The joke was over, and he needed his second cup of pour-over. I need more coffee, Maya. I didn't answer. I walked past the living room, past the custom-built bookshelves I'd specified, and went into my home office. This was once my studio. It's where I drafted my final project for my master's program. Now it's where I pay the bills, manage the landscapers, and order Daniel's specific brand of vitamins. My old drafting table was pushed into the corner, covered in Alex's old textbooks. I sat down at the desk, opened my laptop, and clicked on a private browsing window. My hands weren't shaking. They were perfectly, unnervingly still. I typed, one-way flights, Seattle to Austin. Why Austin? Because Daniel hated it. He called it a wannabe tech hub because it was warm, because I had never been there, and it contained zero memories of him. A flight was leaving in 10 days. 1:30 p.m. I pulled my wallet out of my purse. I had a credit card in my name, the one I was supposed to use for household emergencies. This, I realized, was the ultimate household emergency. I typed in the numbers. I clicked purchase. The confirmation email appeared in my inbox 30 seconds later. 10 days. I sat there for a moment, just breathing. In, out. The house was silent again. The laughter from the kitchen had died down. I could hear the faint sound of the TV, which meant they had moved on. The entire incident already forgotten by them. But I would never forget. I opened a new tab. A local independent bank. Open new personal account. I filled in my information. I made a small initial transfer from the household account, just $150, small enough to be mistaken for groceries. I closed the laptop. I stood up and looked at my old drafting table. I ran my hand over the wood, feeling the nicks and pencil grooves. He thought I was useless. He thought my contribution was negligible. Daniel was a founder. He built things from code, from ideas, from pixels on a screen. He didn't understand. I was an architect. I build things with steel and glass and concrete. I build foundations. I know how to build something, but I also know, better than anyone, how to dismantle it. I know exactly where the load-bearing walls are, and I had just pulled the pin on the first one. I walked back out to the kitchen, a faint, calm smile on my face. The certificate was still on the counter. Daniel and Alex were in the living room, watching some sports analysis show. I picked up the certificate. It really was a nice frame. I walked back to my office and hung it on the wall, right above my desk. A reminder, a motivator, my new North Star. Then I went back to the kitchen, poured Daniel his second cup of coffee, and brought it to him in the living room, just like I always did. "There you are," he said, not looking away from the screen. "Took you long enough." "Sorry," I said, my voice sweet as poison. I just had to take care of something. I went back to the kitchen. The remains of the blintzes were congealing on the serving platter. The sink was still full of soapy, cooling water. I plunged my hands back in and began the motions. Scrub, rinse, stack, the invisible cyclical labor that, if I stopped doing it, would cause the entire house to grind to a halt in less than a week. 12 years, that's what the certificate said. 12 consecutive years of negligible contribution. I paused, a half-washed plate in my hand, and looked around the room. I wasn't just a stay-at-home mom. I was a graduate of one of the top architectural programs in the country. When I met Daniel, he was a brilliant, frantic coder with a terrible haircut, living on instant ramen in a cramped apartment. I was a junior designer at a prestigious Seattle firm, already managing small commercial projects. I had a future. People knew my name. Then he got his first round of seed funding. Alex was 4. The startup, Ethereal, was taking off. Daniel sat me down in that cramped apartment, took my hands, and gave me the pitch. Not a pitch for investors, but for me. "Maya, I can't do this without you," he'd said, and his eyes were so bright with belief. "This thing is going to be huge, but I can't build it and raise Alex. One of us has to be the anchor. You're so good at organizing things, at making things work." It made sense. His job had the exponential growth potential. My job was stable but linear. We were a team. I believed in him. I believed in us, so I agreed. I traded my drafting table for a PTA spreadsheet. I quit my job to become the unpaid COO of the Jensen household. My first project? This house. We bought the land, an overgrown, sloping lot with a view of the water. Daniel saw the trees. I saw the sightlines. "Just find a good builder," he'd said. "Get something with a big office for me." But I did more than that. I opened my old AutoCAD program and I started to draw. I spent 6 months designing this house. Me. I'm the one who designed the 2-story glass wall in the living room, angled perfectly to catch the morning light without the afternoon glare. I'm the one who specified the open plan layout, the seamless flow from kitchen to living space, which Daniel loves to show off at his investor parties. "The house has great flow," he says, as if the house just happened. I'm the one who designed the custom walnut cabinetry, with its hidden pull hardware and soft-close drawers. I'm the one who argued with the contractor for 3 weeks about the cantilevered staircase. "It's an engineering nightmare," he'd said. "It's an engineering challenge," I'd countered, and I showed him my structural math. The house became my last secret portfolio, a masterpiece no one would ever see. I had quite literally designed my own prison, a beautiful, minimalist, award-worthy prison where I was now serving a life sentence. And the inmates I was serving, they didn't just take me for granted. They had graduated to active, gleeful contempt. I finished the dishes, my knuckles aching. I wiped down the quartz countertops. I ran the garbage disposal, the useless work. The word useless echoed in my head. Useless. Like the way I managed the family's complex financial portfolio? Useless. Like the way I edit Daniel's keynote speeches, translating his technical jargon into the visionary language that investors love? Useless. Like coaching Alex for his debate tournaments, drilling him on logic and rhetoric until he became the state champion? Useless. Like the fact that I remembered his mother's birthday, his investors' anniversaries, the names of all their children? I had been the foundation, the rebar, the load-bearing walls, and they had just spray-painted graffiti all over it. I looked from the kitchen, my kitchen, through the open-plan space I'd designed, and down the hall to my office. I could see the corner of the black frame I'd hung on the wall. Negligible contribution. That wasn't just an insult. It was a breach of contract. The 12-year contract I'd signed when I believed we were a team. And the thing about being an architect is that you read the fine print. You understand penalty clauses. You know what happens when one party fails to deliver. I had 10 days. 10 days to calculate the damages. 10 days to prepare the demolition. The first test came 4 days later. Tuesday evening. Daniel was vibrating with a nervous energy that always manifested as sharp, barking commands. "Maya, are the Sancerre glasses chilled?" "Not cold, chilled." "Maya, did you confirm the car for Mr. Ito? He doesn't like standard Uber Black." "Alex, for God's sake, put on a shirt with a collar. You look like you're going to a skate park." Tonight was the big one. A dinner for Kenji Ito, a notoriously scrupulous venture capitalist from Tokyo. Daniel didn't just want his money. He wanted his validation. He'd been trying to get this meeting for 6 months. And where else to host it but in the house that ethereal built? The lie he'd told so often. He now believed it. I moved through the space with quiet, detached efficiency. Yes, the glasses were chilled. Yes, the car was confirmed. I had also, in the last 4 days, opened my secret bank account, set up a new email address, and scanned 12 years of our joint tax returns into a password-protected file. I went upstairs to change. I chose the navy blue sheath dress. It was simple, elegant, and professional. Daniel had once told me it was a little severe, and that I should try wearing red more, like Sarah from marketing. I put it on. I did my makeup with a steady hand, a mask of serene competence. This wasn't Maya, the wife. This was Maya, the designer, the strategist, the project manager, giving her final presentation. When Mr. Ito arrived with his 2 associates, I was the one who greeted them at the door. I bowed slightly, a sign of respect I'd researched. "Ito-san, welcome. We are so honored to have you in our home." Daniel, standing just behind me, was momentarily surprised. I'd stolen his opening line. "Your home is remarkable," Mr. Ito said, his eyes moving from the cantilevered staircase to the 2-story glass wall, now framing the glittering lights of Seattle. "My wife designed it," Daniel said smoothly, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "She handles all the domestic aesthetics." "Aesthetics? A word you use for throw pillows, not for structural engineering," I smiled. "Daniel is the visionary," I said. "I just build the framework for his ideas." Mr. Ito looked at me, a flicker of genuine interest in his eyes. "You are an architect?" "I was before I took time to raise our son and manage our household," I said, my voice light. "Now my main project is supporting Daniel's vision for Ethereal." We moved into the living room. I served the Sancerre. I'd also procured a rare Japanese whiskey I knew Ito-san preferred, which I'd had to source from a specialty store in the International District. Daniel, who only drank bourbon, hadn't even thought of it. For 2 hours, I was flawless. I was the ghost at the table, refilling glasses before they were empty. Steering the conversation away from a political landmine, one of the associates stumbled toward, and laughing softly at Daniel's pre-rehearsed origin story jokes. And all the while I was listening, I was cataloging, when Daniel said, "I designed Ethereal to be seamless, intuitive, much like this house." Great design should be invisible. I filed it away. He's taking public credit for my work in front of financial partners. When Alex was called in to say hello, he was perfectly charming, the prodigy son. He shook Mr. Ito's hand. It's great to meet you, sir. My dad talks about your market insights all the time. I'm just the debate guy. Mom's the one who keeps the domestic APIs running smoothly. The men laughed. Domestic APIs. A cute, coded way of calling me a household servant. It was the exact same intellectual condescension as the certificate, just packaged for an audience. I smiled at my son. And you just became a character witness, Alex. By the time I served the dessert, a yuzu-infused panna cotta, light, sophisticated, and palate-cleansing, I knew Daniel had him. Mr. Ito was impressed. Not just by the pitch, but by the package. The stable home, the brilliant son, the elegant, supportive, useless wife who created the perfect, frictionless environment for genius to flourish. They left just after 10. The door clicked shut, and Daniel let out a whoop. We got him, Maya. We got him, he's in. I can feel it. He was high on the win, grabbing me by the waist and lifting me in the air. You were perfect. Absolutely perfect. He set me down, his eyes shining, his face flushed with victory. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in days. See, he said, his voice soft, almost sincere. You're a vital part of this. That whole certificate thing, that was just Alex and me being idiots. A stupid joke. You know I couldn't do any of this without you. You're my anchor. He kissed my forehead, the same way you'd pat a dog. I smiled back, the mask still firmly in place. I know, Daniel. We're a team. Now, let me clean this up. You should go call your co-founder. You're amazing, he said, already pulling out his phone and walking toward his office. I turned back to the table, piled with expensive, dirty plates. I picked up a glass and looked at the faint trace of lipstick on the rim. My lipstick. Anchor. He was right. I was the anchor, the heavy, invisible thing holding him in place, letting him believe he was the one moving the world. He had no idea what happens when the anchor decides to cut the chain. 6 days left. Senior Narrative Adapter Custom Gem Continuity. Link, the investor dinner was a success. Daniel, high on his victory, called me his anchor and dismissed the certificate as a stupid joke. He'd already forgotten. I was left to clean up the wreckage of the party, with only 6 days left until my flight. The next morning, the house was quiet. Daniel had left early for a celebratory breakfast with his co-founder. Alex was at school, no doubt recounting the epic success of the dinner to his debate team. The house was mine again. I went to my office. The certificate of uselessness hung on the wall, its gold leaf inlay catching the morning light. I sat at my desk, the one that used to be a drafting table, and opened the household budget spreadsheet. This was my domain. For 12 years, I had managed every dollar that flowed through this house. Daniel saw the overview, the burn rate, as he called it, but he never ever looked at the line items. Why would he? He had a useless wife to handle the trivialities of grocery bills, utility payments, and landscaping fees. His disinterest was my new weapon. I had already opened the new account at an independent Austin bank, a small local credit union with no branches in Washington state. The account was in my name only, Maya Jensen. I had a P.O. box secured last Wednesday, waiting for the debit card to arrive. Now it was time to fund the escape pod. My hands hovered over the keyboard. This was the first truly irreversible step. Booking the flight felt like a fantasy, a dream. But moving the money, this was theft. No, I stopped myself. It wasn't theft. It was back pay. I looked at the line item for groceries. I'd budgeted $1,800 a month for our specific, high-end, mostly organic tastes. I knew I could really do it for $200. I opened the joint checking account and made a transfer. Amount, $150. Reason, household supplies. My heart hammered against my ribs. I waited, as if a siren would go off in the house, as if Daniel would get a push notification on his phone. Your useless wife is stealing from you. Nothing. Just the silent confirmation on the screen. Transfer successful. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. A slow, giddy, terrifying smile spread across my face. I had done it. I looked at the certificate on the wall. Negligible contribution. Okay, Daniel, let's calculate the value of negligible. I went down the list. Landscaping and garden, $400 month. The wisteria I'd planted and trained myself saved us hiring a specialist. I transferred $75 reason, contractor payment, home maintenance and decor, $500 month. The fund I was supposed to use for new throw pillows. I transferred $200. Reason, plumbing repair. Alex, school and activities, $750 month. His debate trips, his tailored suits, his tutors. I knew for a fact he hadn't used his book allowance. I transferred $125 reason, school fees. I was an architect. I knew how to find the hidden spaces in a structure, the little voids in the walls that no one else knew were there. This budget was the blueprint of our life, and I had designed it. I knew exactly where to skim. I did this every day for the next 5 days. I went to the grocery store and got cash back with every purchase, a wad of 20s and 50s that I tucked into an old, hollowed-out architectural textbook on my shelf. I'd walk out of the store with $300 worth of groceries and $200 in my pocket. My escape pod account grew. 150, 450, 800, 300. It wasn't a fortune. It wasn't enough to live on for long. But Daniel was the visionary. He didn't understand the power of liquidity. This wasn't a retirement fund. This was a getaway fund. It was the security deposit on a small loft. It was the first month's rent. It was the money to buy a new laptop, a new bed, and a new set of coffee mugs. By Friday, I had $2,250 in my new account, and another $800 in cash hidden in the book. The fear I'd felt on that first transfer was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, thrilling efficiency. This was my new project. I wasn't household manager Maya. I was reclamation specialist Maya. Every dollar I moved felt like I was unscrewing a single bolt from the prison I'd built. On my way back from the grocery store, I stopped at the post office. I unlocked my P.O. box. Inside was a plain white, windowless envelope. My new debit card. I held it in my hand. It was a simple piece of plastic with a generic abstract blue logo. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was my key. It was my passport. It was tangible proof that a new life was waiting. 5 days left. My hands were shaking as I drove to the appointment. Not with the giddy thrill of theft, but with a cold, hollow fear. This was the part that made it real. Funding an escape pod was one thing. Hiring a demolition crew was another. I told Daniel I was going to a specialty lighting showroom in Sodo, a to-the-trade-only place, to look for a new chandelier for the foyer. It was the perfect lie. It was a domestic task, wrapped in the language of exclusive design, and it justified a 3-hour absence. Great, he'd said, not looking up from his laptop. Just don't get that weird, spiky-looking stuff. My destination was not a lighting showroom. It was a steel and glass high-rise on 4th Avenue, the kind of building that housed hedge funds and corporate law firms. I'd found her name after a 3 a.m. deep dive search. Eleanor Vance. The online reviews from men were universally terrible. Vulture, shark, soulless. The reviews from women were simpler. She saved my life. She got me what I deserved. Her office was on the 48th floor. The reception area was silent. All white marble and gray flannel, with a single, massive, abstract oil painting on the wall. It smelled like expensive, unscented soap and money. I felt like a fraud, a housewife in a navy sheath dress, playing dress-up in a world of sharks. The receptionist led me to a corner office. The view was staggering, overlooking the entire Puget Sound. Eleanor Vance didn't get up when I entered. She was probably in her late 50s, with salt and pepper hair cut in a severe geometric bob. She wore a sharp, charcoal gray suit and no jewelry except for a watch that looked more expensive than my car. She was the kind of woman Daniel would respect and fear. "Mrs. Jensen," she said. Her voice was like gravel. "You have 60 minutes, start." I sat. My carefully prepared speech evaporated. I felt small, stupid, and petty. "My husband," I started, my voice trembling. "For Mother's Day, he gave me a gift." A joke. My son filmed it. I fumbled for my phone and pulled up the photo I'd taken of the certificate, still hanging on my office wall. I pushed the phone across the vast empty desk. Eleanor Vance picked it up. She put on a pair of sleek black-framed glasses and read the words. Her expression didn't change. "Certificate of uselessness," she read aloud, her voice flat. She set the phone down. "And what is your husband's current, fully vested valuation?" I was stunned. "What?" "His valuation, ethereal, what's it worth? And what's your stake?" I don't have a stake," I'm not on the payroll. I'm just useless. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I designed our house, but I'm not on the company charter. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. For the first time, she looked at me, really looked at me, with an intensity that was almost physical. "Stop," she said. "It wasn't a request. Stop talking like his wife. Start talking like his partner. You didn't stay at home. For 12 years, you have been the unpaid chief operating officer of his entire life. You've been the lead architect, project manager, and general contractor for his primary physical asset, your home. You've been his head of PR, his social secretary, his event planner, and the lead strategist for his son's academic career. His visionary work exists because your negligible contribution handled literally everything else." I just stared. My throat was thick. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear those words. Translated from the language of love into the language of labor. She continued, "The law in this state does not care about jokes. It cares about community property. His valuation, his stock options, his 401k, the house you built, all of it is 50% yours. That certificate isn't petty, Mrs. Jensen. It is Exhibit A in a documented pattern of emotional and financial devaluation. It's the smoking gun." She leaned forward. "So here's my advice. The most powerful negotiating position is the one from which you have already left. When he can't find you, he can't manipulate you. He can't apologize and make it up to you and wear you down until you agree to stay. You control the timeline. You control the narrative. He thinks you're useless? Good. Useless women are invisible, and invisible women can pack." She told me exactly what I needed to do. Document everything, every mocking email, every social media post, every financial statement, photograph every room in the house, every improvement I'd made, every receipt for materials I'd sourced. I left her office an hour later with a signed retainer and a list. I'd walked in as Maya Jensen, the supportive wife. I walked out as Eleanor Vance's new client. I got back in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I wasn't scared anymore. I was an architect, and I had just been handed the blueprints for my new life. 4 days left. That night I waited until 1 a.m. I waited until I heard the deep, even breathing of Daniel's sleep from the master bedroom and the faint sound of Alex's video game finally clicking off down the hall. The house I had designed was finally, truly mine. I went to my office and closed the door. I didn't turn on the overhead light, just the small desk lamp. The certificate of uselessness on the wall seemed to glow in the small pool of light. I took a deep breath and got to work. My first target was the house itself. I was an architect, and this was my portfolio. I took out my phone and began moving through the silent house, not as its inhabitant, but as an appraiser. I photographed everything. I photographed the cantilevered staircase, taking close-ups of the steel joinery I'd had to fight the contractor on. I photographed the custom, recessed lighting in the living room, angled to wash the walls in a specific, ambient glow. I photographed the built-in walnut shelving, with its perfect mitered corners. I went into the kitchen and documented the soft, close drawers I'd sourced, the integrated sub-zero fridge I'd seamlessly hidden, the quartz waterfall edge on the island. I went outside onto the terrace I'd designed. I photographed the integrated drainage, the custom concrete fire pit, and the wisteria I had spent 8 years training to grow perfectly along the pergola. I had the receipts for all of it. I had the original digital blueprints, the email chains with the builders. He had paid for it, but I had created it. For an hour, I was a ghost, my phone's camera silently clicking, documenting 12 years of my creative, unpaid labor. At 2:30 a.m., I returned to my office. Phase 2, the financials. I plugged a new encrypted USB drive into my laptop, the kind Eleanor had told me to buy. Cash purchase from a drugstore 3 towns over. I opened the digital filing cabinet I had so meticulously maintained. I didn't just look. I downloaded 12 years of joint tax returns. Click. Statements from Daniel's 401k, the one that had ballooned since I took over managing the household. Click. His ethereal stock option agreements, the ones I had read and helped him understand. Click. The investment portfolio. The mortgage statements for the house, the car loans, 12 years of our entire financial life, reduced to a series of PDFs and dragged into a single protected folder. At 4 a.m., I moved to the final, most painful phase, the emotional evidence. This was the ammunition Eleanor had spoken of. I opened Alex's social media accounts. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear, from rage. I'd always tried to be the cool mom, the one who respected his privacy. I saw now that my respect was just another form of willful ignorance. I scrolled, and I screenshotted. My stomach clenched. It was all there. Years of it. A photo from last Thanksgiving. I was in the background, visible through the kitchen doorway, clearly stressed, pulling the turkey from the oven. The caption: "The domestic API is running at 100% capacity. Anna blessed." An Instagram story from 2 months ago. He'd secretly filmed me trying to work the new smart TV remote, my face a mask of frustration. He'd put a clown filter on my face. Caption: "Mom vs. Technology. Tech loses." A tweet from Daniel, sent to one of his venture capital buddies during Alex's state debate finals. Sitting through the world's most boring PTA meeting. Maya actually likes this stuff. Thank God one of us is willing to do the grunt work. Teamwork, grunt work. A screenshot of a text message on Alex's laptop, which he'd left open on the kitchen counter 2 weeks ago. From his dad. "Just make sure your mom has the house perfect for the Edo dinner. Her one job." Her one job. I screenshotted every post, every story, every casual, cruel dismissal. I saved them all. I named the folder, Negligible Contributions. Finally, I turned in my chair and faced the wall. I opened my phone's camera one last time. I centered the lens on the certificate of uselessness. I made sure the light was perfect, the calligraphy sharp and clear, the signatures of my husband and my son perfectly legible. Click. This was Exhibit A. This was the cover page for my entire case. I looked at the clock. 4:52 a.m. I ejected the USB drive and tucked it into the hidden cache pocket of my wallet. I cleared my browser history, my caches, and my phone's recently deleted folder. I was no longer an architect or a mother or a wife. I was a prosecutor, and I had just gathered all the evidence I needed to win. 3 days left. Tuesday morning. Departure day. I woke up at 5 a.m. just as I always did. I slipped out of bed. Daniel grunted in his sleep and rolled over, pulling the duvet I'd bought with him. I padded downstairs, my bare feet on the bamboo floors. For a moment, the routine was so ingrained. My body just moved. Toward the coffee maker, toward the fridge. I stopped myself. No, not today. Today, I made coffee in the Keurig, the one Daniel said was an insult to the bean. I used a generic store-brand pod. I let it brew while I made toast. Just toast. Not blintzes, not fresh-baked scones. Just 2 slices of bread, browned. Daniel came down at 7:15 a.m., nodding his tie. "Morning," he grunted, heading for the espresso machine. He saw the empty counter. "No coffee?" "Oh, I made a Keurig," I said, my voice bright and airy. I handed him a mug. He sipped it. His face twisted. "What is this? It tastes like battery acid." "It's just coffee, Daniel. It's terrible." He poured it down the sink. "Whatever, I'll grab one on the way. I've got that all-hands meeting about the Edo funding. It's a huge day. I'll be late, don't wait up." He grabbed his briefcase. He didn't kiss me. He didn't even look at me. He just walked out the door, one down. Alex stumbled into the kitchen at 7:40 a.m., his eyes glued to his phone. "Is there food?" "I made toast," I said, pushing the plate toward him. He looked at the plate, then at me, with an expression of profound teenage disgust. "Just toast? Like dry toast? There's butter in the fridge." "Wow, okay." He rolled his eyes, a tiny dismissive hump sound leaving his nose. He grabbed an energy bar from the pantry instead, the kind I hated buying. "I'm heading to the library with the debate team after school. Don't need a ride." He slung his backpack over his shoulder. "Try not to break the TV again, Mom," he said, smirking. The clown filter joke. "Have a good day, Alex," I said. He walked out the front door, his head already bowed back to his screen, and let the door slam shut behind him. I stood in the silence. It was 7:42 a.m. My flight was at 1:30 p.m. They were gone. Just like that. No dramatic goodbyes, no tearful confessions. My 12 years of negligible contribution ended not with a bang, but with a complaint about coffee and a slam of a door. The silence of the house pressed in on me. It was perfect, spotless, ready for an investor party. I walked into the living room and looked at the 2-story glass wall I had designed. I saw my reflection, A 44-year-old woman in a simple t-shirt and jeans, looking like a ghost in her own home. I went upstairs, walked into my closet, and pulled out the small black rolling suitcase. I'd packed light: 3 pairs of pants, 5 shirts, underwear, my toiletries, my laptop, and the old architectural textbook containing $800 in cash. I walked into my office and took the certificate of uselessness off the wall. I paused. I'd planned to leave it, but no. This was my trophy. This was my proof. This was my goddamn diploma. I slid the frame into my oversized tote bag. I walked back downstairs. My purse, my tote bag, my one small suitcase. I stood at the front door. I looked at the cantilevered staircase, at the kitchen island, at the life I had poured myself into, the foundation I had built for everyone but me. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. I felt like an architect walking away from a condemned building, just minutes before the demolition charge was set to blow. I opened the front door, stepped outside, and pulled the door shut behind me. I didn't lock it. Why bother? The head of domestic security was officially off the clock. I got in my car, backed out of the driveway, and didn't look back. The drive to SeaTac was automatic. My hands were steady on the wheel. I paid for long-term parking with the secret debit card. The transaction went through. I smiled. I walked into the terminal, the suitcase rolling silently behind me. I checked the bag at the kiosk. One way, Seattle to Austin. The machine printed the tag. I attached it to the handle. I watched it disappear on the conveyor belt. There was no turning back. That was my last piece of my old life, and I had just handed it over. Going through security was a strange, out-of-body experience. I put my shoes in the bin, my laptop, my tote bag with the certificate. I walked through the scanner. On the other side, I collected my things. I was just another anonymous traveler. No one's wife. No one's mom. Just a woman with a one-way ticket. I sat at the gate for an hour, drinking a real, scalding hot, terrible airport coffee. And it was the best coffee I'd ever had. When they called my zone, I stood up, walked down the jet bridge, and found my seat. 24A, a window seat. I buckled in. I put in my earbuds. I stared out the window as the plane pushed back, taxied, and then raced down the runway. The moment the wheels left the tarmac, the moment that undeniable physical sensation of ascent pressed me back into my seat, I finally let go. A single tear rolled down my cheek. It wasn't sadness. It was pressure. 12 years of pressure, of being compressed, of making myself smaller, finally being released. I watched the gray, familiar sprawl of Seattle, my beautiful, perfect prison, shrink until it was nothing but a map. And then we punched through the clouds, and there was nothing but blue sky. Part 9. The new blueprint. The air that hit me as I stepped out of the terminal was a physical shock. It was hot, thick, and smelled like baked asphalt and mesquite. It was the complete opposite of the cool, pine-scented air of Seattle. I pulled out my phone, took a deep breath, and hailed a ride. I had arranged it all from my office prison, a short-term lease on a small loft in a converted warehouse in East Austin. I'd seen 3 photos of it, signed the lease digitally, and paid the deposit with my secret debit card. The property manager, a woman named Maria, met me at the door. She was in her 60s, with a face like a friendly, wrinkled map, and she was holding a set of keys. She didn't ask where I'd come from. She didn't ask why a woman with a $3,000 handbag was renting a 500-square-foot unfurnished studio with 1 suitcase. She just unlocked the heavy metal-clad door. "Water and electric are on," she said, her voice a pleasant Texan drawl. "Trash is in the alley. It's loud on Fridays. Welcome to the building." She handed me the keys and walked away. Just like that. No questions. No judgment. I stepped inside and shut the door. The sound of it closing echoed. The loft was 1 single square room. The floors were scarred, original concrete. The walls were old, exposed red brick. A small kitchenette was tucked along one wall, and a single, massive, grimy warehouse window looked out over an alley. It was empty. Not minimalist empty, like my Seattle house. Just empty. And it was the most beautiful room I had ever seen. It was a blank page, a new blueprint. My suitcase and my tote bag looked tiny in the middle of the vast empty floor. I walked over and opened my tote. I pulled out the heavy, gold-leafed frame. I leaned it against the brick wall, right where the sunlight from the high window hit it. "Certificate of uselessness," I read aloud. My voice sounded small in the big room. It was the first piece of art for my new home. A reminder I was starving. I hadn't eaten anything all day but a pack of airline pretzels. I grabbed my purse and walked out into the heat. There was a grocery store 3 blocks away. It wasn't the pristine, curated market I used to drive 30 minutes to. It was a normal neighborhood grocery store, with fluorescent lights and linoleum floors. I grabbed a basket, and for the first time in 12 years I walked the aisles with no list. No requirements, no one's preferences but my own. I bought a block of the sharpest, most pungent, aged white cheddar I could find. Daniel hated crumbly cheese. I bought a fresh, crusty sourdough baguette. Alex complained it was too hard. I went to the coffee aisle. My hand hovered over the single-origin 25-a-bag beans Daniel loved. I moved my hand 2 shelves down. I picked up a can of cheap, pre-ground diner-style coffee, the kind he called an insult, the kind my grandmother used to brew. It smelled like home. I bought a bottle of cheap, spicy red wine, the kind that cost $9. I bought a bar of dark chocolate with chili. I bought a single perfect green apple. The cashier, a kid with purple hair, rang me up. "That's a weird dinner," he said with a friendly smile. "It's perfect," I said, and I meant it. I walked back to my empty loft. I sat on the concrete floor, my back against the brick wall. I tore a hunk off the bread with my hands. I sawed off a piece of cheese with my new key. I took a long pull of wine straight from the bottle. I ate, sitting in the square of sunlight, looking at my certificate. I was completely, utterly, terrifyingly alone. I had no furniture, no job, and no plan beyond this moment. And I had never, in my entire adult life, felt so happy. I was not lonely. I was free. Loneliness was being invisible in a house full of people. This was solitude. I finished the bread and the apple. The sun was starting to set, turning the brick wall a deep, warm orange. The euphoria of the escape began to fade, replaced by a cold, sharp, and practical thought. The escape pod was funded, but it needed fuel. I had $3,200, my laptop, and a 12-year-old gap on my resume. I pulled my laptop from my bag, sat on the floor, and opened it. My new life had been designed. Now, I had to figure out how to build it. Part 10, Re-entering the world. I opened my laptop. The battery was at 80%. I didn't know how long it would last. I tethered to my phone's hotspot and opened my old resume. The document stared back at me, a relic from another life. Maya Jensen, junior designer, Peterson and Kroll Architects, Seattle, 2008-2012. And then, nothing. A 12-year chasm. A black hole of PTA meetings, grocery lists, and negligible contributions. I glanced at the certificate of uselessness, propped against the brick wall. Its gold leaf lettering mocked me. I was 44 years old, in a strange city, with no job, no connections, and a resume that screamed obsolete. For a moment, a wave of panic so cold and so vast washed over me that I couldn't breathe. What had I done? Daniel was right. Alex was right. I was useless. Then I heard Eleanor Vance's voice in my head, sharp as gravel. "Stop talking like his wife. Start talking like his partner. You have been the unpaid chief operating officer of his entire life." I took a deep breath. She was right. I wasn't useless. I was unpaid. I put my fingers on the keys. I wasn't a stay-at-home mom. I was a consultant. I highlighted the 12-year gap and typed, "Operations and Logistics Coordinator, Jensen Household." My hands were shaking. It looked ridiculous. It looked like a lie. No, I told myself. Translate the labor. I started a new bullet point. What did I do? I ran the house. I built the house. I typed, "Lead architect and project manager, 4.2 Maller's custom residence." Directed all phases of design and construction for a 5,800 skew-and-15 property, from initial concept and blueprinting to contractor negotiation and final execution. Oversaw all structural engineering challenges, including a custom cantilevered staircase. I stared at the words. It was true, all of it. I kept typing. Financial planning and asset management. Managed and optimized a complex 7-figure annual household budget, including all procurement, vendor contracts, and asset allocation. Stakeholder relations and event management. Executed high-stakes investor and stakeholder events, managing all logistics from catering and staffing to strategic guest engagement. Strategic communications coach. Provided private coaching for high school level competitive debate, resulting in a state championship title. By the time I was done, the gap was gone. It had been replaced by a resume that looked less like a mom and more like a high-level freelance COO who also happened to be an architect. I saved the file. I spent the next 2 days applying for every junior design and architectural assistant job in Austin. The insecurity was overwhelming. My AutoCAD skills were a decade old. I'd never even used Revit, the new industry standard software. I got 2 interviews. The first was at a huge corporate downtown firm. The interviewer, a man in his 30s with an expensive watch, glanced at my resume. "So, Jensen household. That's like a family office?" "It was a private residence I managed," I said. "Right," he smirked. "So you were a mom. Look, your skills are antique, and we need people who can hit the ground running." I was out in 7 minutes. I walked back to my loft, the 100-degree heat feeling like a physical blow. The defeat was crushing. The second interview was the next day, a small boutique firm in a converted bungalow in East Austin. Ramos Design Studio. The sign was hand-painted. A woman with a streak of silver in her black hair and paint smudges on her jeans opened the door. "You're Maya. I'm Isabella. Come on in." The studio was a creative, glorious mess of blueprints, material samples, and half-built models. We sat at a battered wooden table. Isabella looked at my resume, her face unreadable. She tapped the first entry. "Lead architect. 4.2 Mayor Custom Residence. This Jensen household. This was your house, wasn't it?" I froze. "Yes." "So you were the client and the architect?" "Yes," I said, my voice small. "My husband, he was the client. I was the architect. Creative," she said. She didn't sound impressed. "Anyone can make a resume sound good. Do you have a portfolio? Or did you manage that too?" My heart hammered. This was it. I reached into my tote bag, pulled out the encrypted USB drive, and plugged it into my laptop. "I have the blueprints," I said, "and the renderings, and the structural plans." I opened the file. I turned the laptop around. Isabella was silent. She used my trackpad clicking through the files. She zoomed in on the CAD drawings for the staircase. She pulled up the 3D model of the living room, the one with the 2-story glass wall. She spent 5 full minutes just clicking, zooming, and reading my notations. Finally, she looked up at me. Her dark eyes were sharp and appraising. "The joinery on that staircase. That's not just design. That's engineering. You fought a contractor for that, didn't you?" "For 3 weeks," I said, a real smile touching my lips for the first time. He said it was a nightmare. I showed him my math. Isabella leaned back, a slow, appraising smile spreading on her own face. "I'll be honest. Your software skills are a fossil. You don't know Revit, you don't know Rhino, and I'll bet your AutoCAD is rusty as hell. But this," she tapped the screen, "I can't teach this. I can teach you a program. I can't teach you vision, and I can't teach you how to win a fight with a contractor." She folded her arms. "You'll be a junior designer. You'll be fetching coffee and redrawing bathroom layouts for 6 months while you learn the software. Your pay will be terrible, but you'll be building again. You start Monday." I walked out of the bungalow back into the blinding Texas sun. I was a junior designer. I was at the bottom. I was 44 years old, making less than I did at 24. And I felt like I could tear the sky in half. I wasn't a useless woman. I wasn't a household manager. I was an architect. And I was back. The first week at the studio was the hardest and best week of my life. Isabella wasn't kidding. I was a fossil. I spent 10 hours a day staring at a glowing screen, my brain aching as I tried to force 12 years of technological evolution into it. The other designers, all in their 20s, were kind. But they moved with a speed I found breathtaking. They spoke in a language of plugins and rendering engines I didn't understand. I fetched coffee. I redrew the bathroom layout for a small bistro project. 4 times. I answered the phone. I was humble. I was grateful. I was a student. My old life, the one in the glass and walnut prison, felt a million miles away. It was almost 2 weeks since I'd left. I'd been living in my loft, sleeping on an air mattress, eating my weird, perfect meals on the floor. I'd turned off my old Seattle phone, but I kept it charged, connected to the studio's Wi-Fi, tucked in my bag. It was my archive, my evidence locker. I hadn't looked at it in days. On Friday, I was the last one in the studio. It was 8:09 p.m. I was trying to master a Revit tutorial on wall assemblies when my bag, sitting on the floor, buzzed. Not my new phone, my old one. The sound was a jolt, a phantom limb aching. I hadn't heard that notification chime in a week. I pulled it out. The screen was dark, but a single notification was lit up. A Facebook alert. Chloe Jensen and 47 others have tagged you in a post. Chloe, Daniel's sister. My blood went cold. I'd stayed off social media. I was a ghost. Now they were trying to summon me. My finger hovered over the notification. I felt a deep, primal urge to throw the phone against the brick wall, to shatter it, to stay hidden. But I heard Eleanor's voice. You control the narrative. I tapped it. The app opened. And there it was. A post from Daniel from 2 days ago. The photo was from our vacation to the San Juan Islands 3 years ago. It was the perfect family shot. Daniel at the helm of a rented sailboat, his arm around my shoulder, both of us grinning. Alex in front, wearing a life vest, looking heroically bored. We looked happy. We looked wealthy. We looked whole. And then the caption. My eyes scanned the words, and the floor of the studio seemed to drop out from under me. Friends, this is the hardest post I've ever had to write. As some of you know, my beautiful, wonderful wife Maya has been missing for 11 days. She walked out of our home on Tuesday morning without her car, her wallet, or her phone. We are all, especially Alex, completely devastated and broken. Maya has been under an incredible amount of stress lately, and we were all worried. But we never, ever imagined this. She hasn't been herself for a while. We fear she is in a deeply vulnerable state and not thinking clearly. We have filed a missing person report, but the police are limited. This is where I need you, our community. If anyone sees her or has any information, please, I beg you, contact me or the Seattle PD. Maya, my love, if you are seeing this, please just come home. We love you more than words can say. Alex needs his mom. I need my wife. Whatever is wrong, we can fix it. We just want you safe. I read it twice. The lies were so slick, so perfectly crafted, they almost created their own gravity. Without her car, her wallet, or her phone. A lie. He assumed I'd left them, because he couldn't imagine I'd have the foresight to build a new life, to have a new wallet, a new phone, a new bank, all waiting for me. Incredible amount of stress. Not herself. Vulnerable state. He wasn't looking for a wife. He was building a case for an involuntary psychiatric hold. He was painting me as a fragile, hysterical woman who had a breakdown. He was invalidating my escape. He was invalidating me. My blood wasn't cold anymore. It was boiling. It was a clean, hot surgical rage. I scrolled down to the comments. There were hundreds. The post had been shared over 1,000 times. It was a digital wildfire of sympathy, all aimed at him, his sister Chloe. Daniel, you are a saint. I always knew she was fragile, but never this. You've been her rock for so long, holding you and Alex in the light. A VC from the Ito dinner. Daniel, my friend, this is shocking. Whatever resources my firm can offer, they are yours. Stay strong. A PTA mom from Alex's school. Oh, Daniel, this is just heartbreaking. Alex has been so brave at school, we've all noticed. We're starting a meal train for you and him. Please let us know what you need. A colleague from Ethereal. The whole team is here for you, boss. You've been carrying so much. We'll handle everything at the office. Just focus on your family. Fragile, her rock, carrying so much. Alex has been so brave. The narrative was set. He was the hero, the suffering husband, the stoic father, holding the world together while his crazy wife had a tragic public breakdown. I was the villain. I was the crazy one. I was the one who had abandoned my son, my perfect life, my sainted husband, all because I was unstable. I looked at the photo again, my smiling face, Daniel's arm around me, possessive, his hand gripping my shoulder. It wasn't an embrace. It was an assertion of ownership. He did this to control the story, to ensure that if I ever surfaced, no one would believe me. I'd be the unreliable narrator of my own life. He thought I'd see this, see the world turn against me and come crawling back, broken, ashamed, and ready to be forgiven. He thought he was writing the end of the story. I closed the app. I stood up, my legs shaking with adrenaline. I looked around the messy, imperfect real studio. He had no idea. He had no idea that I wasn't missing. I was found. He had no idea I wasn't vulnerable. I was furious. He had no idea that the useless woman he'd painted as a fragile victim was. At this very moment, an employed architect, with her own money, her own lawyer, and a high-resolution photograph of a certain framed certificate. You want a narrative, Daniel? I whispered to the empty room. Let's build a narrative. My rage was a white-hot furnace, but I didn't move. I just stood there and let it burn. I let it forge itself into something else. Something cold, hard, and useful. I thought of Eleanor Vance. You control the narrative. I thought of Daniel. He had built his narrative on a foundation of lies and emotion. He'd used a soft, smiling 3-year-old photo to sell his story of the heartbroken husband. He was counting on me being too ashamed, too scared, or too fragile to fight back. He was counting on the world believing him, the charismatic tech founder over me, the stressed housewife. He had made a critical architectural error. His entire story was a facade, a beautiful, convincing lie held up by nothing. He had forgotten that I am an architect. I don't deal in facades. I deal in foundations. And I had the structural proof. I didn't engage. I didn't comment on his post. I didn't write a long, emotional rebuttal, desperately pleading my case. You don't argue with a lie. You obliterate it with a single, undeniable truth. I opened my own Facebook profile. It was a digital graveyard. My profile picture was 5 years old. Me smiling at one of Daniel's ethereal holiday parties. My hair longer, my eyes softer. Not dead, but not alive. My last post was from 8 months ago. A picture of Alex's debate trophy. The account was a ghost, and it was about to have its resurrection. I went to my photo library. I didn't choose a picture of myself, or a sad quote, or a stock photo of a sunrise. I chose the high-resolution photo I had taken in my Seattle office. The one I'd lit carefully. The one where every word was sharp as a razor. The image uploaded. The black expensive frame. The creamy parchment-style paper. The ornate Gothic script. Certificate of uselessness. I stared at the image, at the 2 signatures at the bottom. Danielle Jensen, Alex Jensen. Premeditated, signed, delivered. Now, for the caption. My fingers flew, but my words were precise. I would not be emotional. I would not be hysterical. I would be surgical. I typed, "Thank you to everyone who has reached out. I want to assure you all that I am not missing, vulnerable, or in a breakdown. I am safe. I have a new job and a new home. This was the Mother's Day gift I received from my husband and son. The joke that I was supposed to be a good sport about, while my son filmed my reaction for his friends. I have decided after 12 years to stop being a good sport. I did not disappear. I left. Please respect my privacy as I build my new life." I didn't tag Daniel. I didn't tag Alex. I didn't tag Chloe or the PTA moms or his investors. I didn't have to. They had all tagged me. The digital breadcrumbs all led back to this. Every person who had commented, "He's a saint," on Daniel's post would get a notification. "Maya Jensen has responded." They would click, expecting a message from a fragile woman. And they would find this. This was not a wife's hysterical crying. This was an architect's evidence. This was a COO's documentation. This was Exhibit A. My finger hovered over the post button. This was the demolition charge. The moment I pressed this, the house of cards Daniel had built, his reputation as the supportive husband, the suffering father, the rock, would be vaporized. The sympathy would curdle into disgust. The meal train would stop. The investors would second-guess his judgment. He had painted me as a fragile, broken woman. He had no idea I was a prosecutor. I pressed post. The screen refreshed. There it was, sitting on my timeline, stark and irrefutable. I didn't wait. I didn't sit and refresh, watching for the first like or gasp. That's what he would do. I silenced the old phone. I didn't turn it off. I wanted the digital record intact. But I silenced every notification. I put the phone back in my bag, zipped it shut, and shoved it under my desk. I turned back to my monitor. The Revit tutorial on wall assemblies was still glowing on the screen. I put my headphones back on, opened the program, and went back to work. I had a bathroom layout to finish. The explosion would be digital, but I knew it would be deafening. And for the first time in my life, I wouldn't be the one cleaning up the debris. The fallout was immediate and absolute. It was a digital detonation. My old phone, still silenced in my bag, began to vibrate so intensely from the influx of messages that it hummed against the floor of my loft. When I finally checked it, 24 hours later, the post had been shared thousands of times. The narrative hadn't just flipped. It had been rewritten, line by line, by the very community that had celebrated him. The PTA moms were horrified and disgusted. The meal train was abruptly canceled. His sister Chloe, after posting a vicious comment calling me a liar, was so thoroughly attacked by other women that she deleted her entire profile. Daniel's investors were silent. His colleagues were silent. The tech blogs, always sniffing for hubris, picked up the story. Ethereal founder in useless wife scandal. Daniel's post, the one painting him as a saint, was gone within an hour. He just couldn't delete mine. He tried, of course. He reported the post for harassment, for bullying. But Facebook's algorithm, like the law, is literal. I hadn't bullied him. I had posted a picture of a gift I'd received. My post stayed up. His digital victimhood was vaporized. I told Eleanor. She was, as always, tactical. Good, she'd said. He's a narcissist. You've just given him a public narcissistic injury. He's cornered. Now he'll make a mistake. Weeks passed. I worked. I learned Revit. I redrew the bistro bathroom for the 6th and finally final time. I got my first paycheck. It was small, but it was mine. I bought a real bed. Then I got the call from Eleanor. It was a Friday. Maya, she said, her voice crisp. Are you aware of the Future Vision Tech Summit? It's huge, I said. It's the biggest tech conference in Austin this fall. Why? Because your husband is the closing keynote speaker, today at 4 p.m. I froze. He was here, in my city. He was on my turf, trying to reclaim the narrative, to prove he was still the visionary. He's that arrogant? I whispered. They crave the stage, Eleanor said, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. And he's about to give his grand finale. I suggest you watch the live stream. A package was just delivered. My heart wasn't hammering. It was beating, slow and steady and cold. I went to the studio's small conference room and pulled up the summit's main feed on the big monitor. There he was, larger than life on a 50-foot screen. He was pacing the stage, a headset mic on, wearing his signature black t-shirt. He looked tired, but the arrogance was still there, like a structural flaw. He was talking about corporate transparency and the authentic self. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. Authenticity, he was saying, isn't about what you say. It's about what you do. It's about building a foundation of truth. I watched, detached. This wasn't my husband. This was a character, a well-rehearsed, fraudulent character. And then I saw it. From the side of the stage, a man in a simple dark suit and tie walked out. He wasn't security. He wasn't a tech. He was just a man, holding a large manila envelope. Daniel faltered. He hadn't seen him. The man walked calmly, directly, to the center of the stage. Daniel finally noticed him and stopped, his sentence about truth hanging in the air. Excuse me, Daniel said, his visionary voice suddenly tight. This is a closed stage. The man didn't flinch. The livestream camera zoomed in, catching both of them in the frame. Mr. Daniel Jensen? The man asked, his voice booming over the hot mic. Yes? Daniel hissed, trying to wave him off. I'm in the middle of... The man held out the envelope. You've been served. The silence in the auditorium was so complete, I could hear the hum of the monitor. The man placed the envelope on the podium in front of Daniel, turned, and walked calmly off the stage. Daniel just stood there. The camera was tight on his face. The confident, charismatic founder was gone. He looked pale. He looked small. He looked useless. The online chat for the live stream, which had been full of tech bro platitudes, just exploded. OMG, did he just get served? In the middle of the keynote? That's the useless wife, isn't it? Savage. Daniel's eyes darted to the envelope. He knew exactly what it was. He was trapped on a stage, under 1,000 spotlights, with a live stream broadcasting his deepest, most profound humiliation to the entire tech world. He had built a prison of glass walls for me, and I had just served him his own sentence in one. He fumbled with the mic, his hands shaking. A technical difficulty, he stammered. He turned and walked off stage. The live stream feed cut to a Future Vision logo. I sat in the conference room, alone, in the silence. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just took a sip of my cold coffee. It was the clean, quiet, satisfying feeling of a perfectly executed demolition. The final load-bearing wall had just come down. I closed the browser. I went back to my desk. My new phone buzzed. The one with the Austin number. An unknown number, Seattle area code. A single text message. Mom? I stared at that one word. Mom? Not Heather, the name he'd started using around his friends. the one that distanced him from me. Mom, a question, an accusation, a plea, all of it packed into 3 letters. He must have seen the live stream. He must have seen his father, his hero, the visionary, humiliated in front of the entire tech world. And he knew, with the cold, sharp logic I had helped him hone for his debate tournaments, that I was the one who had done it. I let the text sit for an hour. I let him wonder. I finished the bathroom layout, saved the file, and emailed it to Isabella. I packed my bag, turned off the lights, and walked out of the studio into the warm, humid Austin night. Only when I was back in my loft, the door locked, sitting on my new bed, did I pick up the phone. My hands were steady. I was no longer the good sport. I was the one setting the terms of engagement. I typed, "I'm not missing Alex, I'm safe." The reply was almost instantaneous. The frantic machine gun tapping of a teenager. "He's a wreck, Mom, you destroyed him. Everyone saw it. Everyone is talking about it. Why would you do that?" There it was. The accusation. The reflex to protect his father. His teammate. My thumbs were cold and precise. He was served divorce papers. It's a legal process. What you should be asking is why he thought the certificate of uselessness was an acceptable gift for Mother's Day. A pause. A long one. The 3 dots would appear, then vanish. He was writing, deleting, rewriting. The debate captain was trying to find an angle, a rebuttal. Finally, "It was a joke, Mom. A really, really stupid joke." I told him it was dumb. "But it was just a joke. You didn't have to do this." It was just a joke. The official party line, the narrative that absolved them of all cruelty, the foundation of their entire defense. And I was an architect. I knew a faulty foundation when I saw one. Filming my humiliation wasn't a joke, Alex. Signing your name to it wasn't a joke. It was an act of profound cruelty. I am not having this conversation over text. If you want to talk to me, you have to do it face to face. You know where I work? I hit send, and then I turned the phone off. I would not be drawn into a high-speed rhetorical battle with a child I had trained to win. The ball was in his court. He could either live in his father's lie, or he could step into the truth. 2 weeks passed. I worked, I slept. I started sketching ideas for my own projects in a new notebook. And then, one Saturday, I was at the studio, catching up on some renderings when the front door opened. It was Alex. He stood in the doorway looking thin, pale, and completely out of place. He was wearing his Seattle prep school uniform, a blazer and tie, in the 95-degree Texas heat. He looked like a ghost. He was clutching the straps of his backpack, his knuckles white. "You came," I said. It wasn't a question. "You're in Texas," he said, stating the obvious. He looked around the messy creative studio, at the material samples and half-built models, his eyes wide. This was not the sterile, minimalist prison he was used to. "This is where you work?" "This is where I work. I'm a junior designer." He stepped inside, his expensive loafers scuffing on the concrete floor. "A junior designer? You used to be an architect. Dad said you gave that up." I was on pause, I said, my voice sharp. "I'm not anymore." "How did you get here, Alex?" "I used my debate tournament travel fund. I told Dad I had a weekend workshop in Dallas. I took a bus from there." He'd lied to his father. He'd planned. He'd executed. It was the most resourceful, independent thing he had ever done. "Okay," I said. I sat on a stool, gesturing to another one. "Sit," he sat. He looked at me, really looked at me. I wasn't wearing my mom uniform of yoga pants and a cashmere sweater. I was in jeans, a paint-smeared t-shirt, my hair tied up in a messy bun. "So," he said, his voice trying to be prosecutorial, the debater's cross-ex voice. "You did it to get back at him." "For the joke." "No," I said. "I did it to get me back. The joke was just the moment I realized that you and he saw me as a thing. An object, a domestic API, not a person. The certificate was just the receipt for 12 years of services you'd stopped valuing." "That's not true," he said, his voice cracking. "He always said you were the anchor. He said he couldn't do it without you." "An anchor, Alex," I said, leaning forward, "is a 10,000-pound weight you throw to the bottom of the ocean to keep a boat from moving. It is the definition of useless until it's needed, and then it's just a tool." "Is that what you think I am?" He flinched. His debate captain composure was crumbling. He had no counter-argument. He was just a 16-year-old kid, and his mom was speaking a language he didn't understand. "He's a mess," he whispered, his eyes filling with tears he was desperately trying to blink back. He's not the same. He just sits in his office. That video, everyone at school has seen it. They're all talking. "I'm sorry you're in the middle of this," I said, and I meant it. "But this is the consequence of your father's actions. And yours. It was a joke," he shouted, standing up, the tears finally falling. "Why do you keep—" "It was just a stupid joke." "Then why did you sign it?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. He froze. "Why did you sign it, Alex?" He looked at me, his face crumpled, all the rhetorical armor gone. He was just a boy, and he was cornered by a truth he couldn't debate. I don't know," he choked out, the words ripped from him. He printed it out at his office. He had it framed. He said it would be epic. He said you'd laugh, that you always laughed. And when I didn't laugh, Alex, when I just stood there, what did you do?" "I kept filming," he whispered, the admission costing him everything. He was sobbing now, full, ugly, racking sobs. "I kept filming. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom." He collapsed back onto the stool, his head in his hands. I didn't move. I didn't rush to comfort him. This was his to feel. The poison had to come out. This was the reckoning. He had to sit in the rubble of what he had done. After a long minute, he looked up, his face red and swollen. Is it really over? With Dad?" "Yes, the divorce is final. He's all alone." He doesn't even know how to use the coffee machine, Mom. The real one." A pathetic, absurd detail. And in that moment, I knew Alex would be okay. He saw his father not as a visionary, but as a man who couldn't make his own coffee. The pedestal had shattered. "He'll learn," I said. "Or he'll hire someone. But it's not my job anymore, Alex. And it's not yours." He nodded, wiping his nose on the sleeve of his expensive blazer. "So what now?" "Now," I said, standing up and grabbing my bag. "I'm going to buy my son his first ever Texas BBQ. And you and I are going to have a very long talk about what kind of man you're going to be. Because you don't have to be him." He looked at me, a flicker of something new in his eyes. Not fear, not arrogance, hope. "Okay," he said. "Okay, Mom." 6 months later, I sat in a sterile conference room in Seattle, a city that now felt like a foreign country. The divorce was being finalized via a remote mediation. Daniel was just a face on a video screen, pixelated and small. He looked diminished. The charismatic visionary was gone, replaced by a gray, tired-looking man who couldn't meet my eyes, even through a camera. Eleanor Vance, sitting beside me in a razor-sharp suit, was relentless. She didn't just argue. She presented a case complete with binders. Binder A, she'd said, contains the full architectural plans and contractor invoices for the marital home, designed pro bono by my client. Binder B, a 12-year financial analysis of household operations, managed by my client, which enabled Mr. Jensen to focus 100% of his energy on ethereal. Binder C, a documented pattern of emotional and financial devaluation, culminating in, but not limited to, Exhibit A. She didn't even have to say the certificate. Daniel's lawyer just sighed. The settlement was not a settlement. It was a capitulation. I received 60% of the value of the house, 50% for my community property stake, and an additional 10% in consideration of undisputed architectural and project management contributions. I received half of his ethereal stock, half of his 401k and significant spousal support for 3 years, the time Eleanor had calculated it would take for me to re-establish my pre-sacrifice earning potential. When it was over, Eleanor muted the call, turned to me, and gave a rare, thin smile. His negligible contribution just cost him half his net worth. Congratulations, Maya. You are now, by legal definition, an extremely valuable woman. I walked out of that building, not feeling vengeful, not even happy. I just felt balanced. The scales, which had been tipped for 12 long years, were finally level. My life in Austin had, in that time, taken root. Alex had moved in with me, into a small 2-bedroom apartment I'd rented, a place with high ceilings and old wooden floors. Our relationship was quiet, careful and honest. He was seeing a therapist. He was learning to cook. He was becoming a good man, not in his father's image, but in spite of it. He'd even stopped debating, telling me he was more interested in building things than in tearing them down. He was thinking about architecture school. At work, I wasn't a fossil anymore. I had not only learned Revit, I had started to design in it. Isabella, seeing my drive, had stopped giving me bathrooms and started giving me clients. First a small cafe redesign, then a residential addition. Last week, she'd called me into her office. "I'm tired of signing off on your drawings," she'd said, her arms crossed. My heart sank. "Oh, yeah, they don't need my signature. They need yours. I'm making you a senior designer. Don't make me regret it." And so, today I'm moving into my new office. It's not a cubicle. It's a real room, with a door, and a huge window that looks out over the neighborhood. I have one box in my hands. It has my favorite pens, a picture of Alex and me at that barbecue. And one last thing. I pull it out. The heavy black gold leaf frame. I'd almost thrown it away. I'd almost smashed it in an alley. But I didn't. It wasn't a curse anymore. It was a receipt. It was the invoice I had finally been paid for. It was the founding document of my new life. I hang it on the wall, right across from my desk, where I will see it every single day. The sun hits the glass, illuminating the ornate calligraphy, Certificate of Uselessness. A young designer, one of the interns, pokes her head in. "Wow, that's intense. Is that like an art piece?" I turn, a slow smile spreading across my face. I look at the certificate, then at the city glowing outside my window, then at the blueprints for my new project waiting on my desk. "Yeah," I say, my voice light, the last 12 years of wait finally gone. "You could say that. It's my diploma. I wasn't an anchor, thrown away and forgotten. I wasn't infrastructure, invisible and unthanked. I was an architect. I had just completed the most difficult demolition and rebuild of my entire career. And the foundation I'd just laid, the one for this new life, it was designed to last.